there's someone in your life that you're mad at and that you essentially blame for a lot of the pain that you feel in your life. Hi everyone, my name is Crystal and I lost 60 pounds in 6 months, and I've been able to keep that weight off for a year now. I do plan to lose more weight. I'm currently pregnant, and after I give birth, then I will continue on with my weight loss journey. But I wanted to give you guys 5 tips for how I've been able to keep the weight off, and it's a little bit unconventional, and I really hope that this is able to help people, because the biggest part of my journey has been figuring out how to not have the weight come back. And I've been able to lose weight in the past, 10 pounds here, 15 pounds there. And for me to be able to keep off the weight for so long, I've realized that what I was doing when I was on my journey was a really big part of how I was able to keep the weight off. And I have 5 tips for you guys, and I'm going to go through the 5 tips, and then I'll go back and kind of explain how each of them helped me. All right, I still write on paper, so if you hear rustling around, that's my paper. Okay, so tip number 1, figure out your who and your why. And again, I'm going to go into what all these things are. Figure out your who and your why. Tip number 2, realize that the reason you gained the weight was not your fault. That initial reason why you gained weight was not your fault. Tip number 3 is decide what you truly want out of this journey. Tip number 4 was make a plan, and tip number 5 was follow through. Now, tip number 1, figure out your who and your why. Essentially, when I started this journey, I was in a lot of pain. That was the main thing. I was in pain. I was 260 pounds. I'm 5'2", and I was not very happy, and I just wanted the pain to go away. I had been to the ER 2 times that year, the year that I turned 30. I'm 33 now. I had been to the ER 2 times that year, and both times they did a workup on me, and they said, there's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly healthy. Again, at 260 pounds. So I knew in that moment, and after years of trying to lose weight, I knew that no one was going to do this for me. I'm getting a bit emotional thinking about it, because I remember having a moment. The reason I went to the ER was because I was having chest pains. And I remember having a moment where I thought to myself, after leaving the doctor, no one is going to do this for me. No one is going to do this for me. And I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I'd always thought, surely by the age of 30, I would figure out this weight loss thing and everything would be fine. And at that point, I had recently had my husband and I had our 4th child, and I had gained a lot of my weight from being pregnant, but I realized that I had to do this for myself. So I got a book called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. And what I did was I decided to make that book an essential part of my journey, because I knew that if I could just maybe dig a little deeper this time, maybe that would help me. Maybe that would help me keep the weight off. And it has actually been really successful in helping me keep the weight off. So when I say tip 1 is to figure out your who and your why, there's someone that you're mad at. And that's something that the book helped me to realize. There's someone in your life that you're mad at and that you essentially blame for a lot of the pain that you feel in your life. There's someone that you identify with your most painful experience, when you first understood what it felt like to be broken, and when you first understood what it felt like to be disconnected from the world around you. And what I didn't realize was that for me, that person was my mother. A lot of this stuff goes back to your parents, right? But my mother and I have a really close relationship. We're best friends. She's amazing. She's the best person ever. But I grew up in Trinidad, and when I was 6 years old, she moved to New York for 3 years to kind of get settled in so that my sister and I could come up and live with her. And we were all so excited because it was really fancy. You know, my mom was moving to America and it was a big deal, and then I would eventually be moving to America. And I was so excited that nothing prepared me for when she would actually be gone. So that morning when I woke up and she was gone, I was 6 years old. And that was, I think, when I realized, okay, things are going to change because, you know, I'm living with my grandmother and my aunt now, and it was great. And all of our cousins lived nearby, and we had mango trees in the backyard and coconut trees. And it was just like an amazing childhood that I had. But the reality is I did resent my mother over all those years. I resented her for those 3 years that she was gone. And I ate to cope with that. Before that, I had never been like a chubby 6-year-old or anything. I was just a normal size 6-year-old. But by the time I was around 9, I had gotten a little on the chubby side. And I remember going to a doctor, and he told my grandmother, you know, she has too much fat. She's just too fat. And he, you know, was so rude and mean about it. And that really stuck out as, you know, one of the most damaging things to me, because I was so young at the time, and no one has ever said to me that I was fat. And so my feelings were not just hurt, but that was one of my points of brokenness as well. So those two things, I was really, really holding on to them. And through my body, I was carrying that. I was carrying the anger towards the doctor for being the first person to label me and tell me who I was. And I was carrying a lot of resentment towards my mother for leaving in the first place. And so when I started on this journey, I figured out my who and why I had been eating so much, and what I was replacing my anger and frustration with. And also, I didn't grow up with my dad, and we knew my dad, and you know, he lived in Trinidad as well, and he would come and visit us. But so I was learning a lot about myself and learning how to heal from that. And once I started that process of every single day figuring out how to process that information, that became a really, really huge part of my journey. And picking up the phone and calling my mom and telling her how I felt. And she never knew. She never knew, because I never knew the resentment that I held. And I really urge you guys, if you really want to keep the weight off this time, if you want it to be something real, if you want it to be more than just, oh, I lost 10 pounds, I lost 20 pounds, and then I gain it back, I urge you guys to, first of all, get that book. It's an excellent book. I'll post a link to it in the description box, but also just try and think about your life on a deeper level. Because for instance, if a light switch isn't working and hasn't been working for years, and people are changing out the light bulbs, and they're dusting off the light bulb, and they're putting a new shade on it, and if the wiring is not working, if nobody thought to check the wiring, maybe the wiring could be the issue. And once the wiring is checked and whatever was disconnected can be reconnected, that could be the beginning of really getting the light to work for the first time. And that was, realizing that for me was the biggest part of this journey. And people don't necessarily talk about really taking that first step, because anyone can lose 50 pounds, anyone can lose 30 pounds, but it's dealing with what brought that weight on to begin with. And I think the reason I was able to keep 60 pounds off is because that's 60 pounds of resentment towards my mother and towards that doctor who labeled me and made me feel shame about my body and all of that kind of stuff. And all of those issues from when I was 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, all of those issues, I feel that is what those 60 pounds are. That's why they have not come back. So that is my step one. Figure out your who. My tip number one is figure out your who and your why.